Hey friends, welcome back to Tickle Tickle, let's pass the pickle. Just kidding. Today I'd like 5 to 10 minutes of your time to talk to you about the Polgar Experiment and conversations that don't help with making friends or trivia. The Polgar Experiment is a very interesting topic of conversation. Of course, it covers, it's about chess playing, and even if you're not into chess playing, which you should be, but I assume most people are probably not, it is still such an interesting conversation to have because it covers topics like child experimentation, the ethics around that, around academia, the battle of the sexes between men and women, and also like life in a communist regime, sort of. So we'll just get right into that. Laszlo Polgar was born in 1946 in Hungary outside Budapest. By the way, do you say Budapest or Budapest? Is it like saying like Barcelona? Do you just sound like an asshole if you say Budapest? I'm not really sure. Please let me know downstairs. So Laszlo was a very, very smart young man. There's not a whole lot available about Laszlo's young life, but there is a lot written about him in his later life. But it's assumed that he was a very well-educated young boy. He was very smart, and he was very interested in this idea of what genius meant. And that's what he studied his whole life right up into university. He would eventually achieve the highest university credentials that you could get in Hungary up until his death. And he wrote his thesis on the topic of genius and whether genius was nature or nurture sort of thing, like what caused it. He had read over 400 different documentaries about, or autobiographies, biographies, that kind of thing. He'd read over 400 books about different geniuses throughout his life, or even before the age of like 25, before he'd completed his education. And he was obsessed with this idea of proving that you could create a genius, that you didn't have to be born a genius, that although prodigies may exist as an anomaly in nature, that more often than not, you could take any child who had a like healthy or very average baseline mind and turn them into a genius given the right circumstances. In 1965, he met his wife Klara, Klara, who was a Ukrainian languages teacher. And at that time, it was kind of common for people it was like the precursor to online dating. So you would date people by letter. So you would send out these letters to just like kind of hit up women and see if you guys could make a match. And he was really straightforward from the beginning. So he said, like, imagine if it was like a 65 Tinder profile. I've never used Tinder, but imagine there's a profile there and he was like looking for a woman to give birth to my children to conduct an experiment with. And most women were like, you crazy girl. But Klara was like, whatever, you crazy, but I'm down, sounds fine, cool. So she went to Hungary, she met Laszlo, and she was like, okay, Bizzle, we can make this work. So then they got married shortly after and then started working on how they would conduct this experiment with their children. And their first daughter, Susan, I believe it's Zusa. I'm not sure exactly. I can't speak Hungarian, obviously, but we'll call her Susan. Her name is Susan. Susan was their first daughter. She was born in 1969, and she began her training around 1973. So let's get to the experiment. So the experiment basically said that if a child by the age of 3 or 4 in that critical time period in their life were given intensive instruction in any specific field, that they could become a genius or genius level intellect in that field very quickly, assuming that they were spending a considerable amount of time. Probably by the age of 10, they would have spent 10,000 hours studying this field, but it could be anything. So Laszlo and his wife Klara, who was also an educator, they had already determined that they were going to teach their kids multiple languages. So all of their children could speak multiple languages, including another language, which is kind of an invented one that is used as an international language. They also taught them high-end mathematics, and they actually had to sue the state to get permission to teach their children at home, because as their experiment gained notoriety or attention in the press, a lot of people all over the world, especially in the Eastern Bloc and in Central Europe and Never Eat Soggy Wieners and Western Asia, thought that they were crazy and compared them to Dr. Frankenstein and were kind of saying that the government should take the kids away. However, due to the fact that Dr. Polgar was highly educated and so was his wife Klara, and that they had both worked as teachers, the government reluctantly allowed them to teach their children at home and conduct this experiment. Neither Laszlo nor Klara were very good at chess. Laszlo was better. Klara was said to be horrible at chess, but they chose chose chess specifically to teach the children because they wanted something that could be measured. So they didn't want to teach the kids like art or dance or like even writing or anything that couldn't be objectively measured by a number. Like in chess, you get like an ELO score, which determines like how good you are at chess. So they wanted something like that, and they're like, this is perfect. Also, chess is kind of a game, so kids would be very into spending like 7-8 hours a day learning chess. So there's actually 3 Polgar sisters. The first one, the oldest one, Susan, followed by their sister Sophia, and then the last one, Yudit, who is the most famous of all of them right now, and we'll get into their accomplishments a little bit later. But essentially from the age of 4 onward, they all started studying chess very, very intensely. And as they grew up, the sisters contributed so much to the world of chess that their father was able to publish over 20 books that all became bestsellers in their day that discuss like chess problems, puzzles, strategies, like walkthroughs, like opening prep, ending prep, a lot of different problems, and they were just genius. Like Laszlo was publishing all these books on their behalf based on the work that the sisters were doing studying with each other, just based on his experiment. By the age of 10, all 3 sisters could easily defeat multiple grandmasters or probably not grandmasters, but they could defeat multiple chess professionals while they were blindfolded and facing a different direction. So I think Susan was probably the first of the sisters. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. She was the first of the sisters at like 9 years old that was able to put on a blindfold, go to the local chess club before, the internet was big, but go down to all the chess masters, put on her little blindfold, and she just slayed the house. She smoked all of them. So they actually were able to prove the experiment with Susan, but they continued it with Sophia, although she was really not as interested, but she loved her family, so she kept doing it. Yudit, who was born last, was not really intended to partake in the same sort of experiment as her sisters. But obviously, if you're the youngest kid and you see out of 3 and you see your older siblings kind of like get to be in this exclusive club, she was like, oh, I'm going to be better than them, and I want to be a part of this too, and like, don't leave me out. So there was actually anecdotes from the other sisters that said that sometimes, like when Yudit was as young as 4 or up to 6, if the sisters were working out difficult problems and they couldn't figure them out, they would wake Yudit up out of bed, ask her to come down to the living room, and she would solve the problem in 2 seconds, and then they'd say, okay, Yudit, you can go back to bed. Unfortunately, the whole family were kind of like pariahs, but through their whole lives, all 3 sisters and their parents have said they were like a super close family, that it never seemed like abuse or torture. They were very glad to have had that experience growing up. It helped them grow as a family. And they all believed their father's thesis that if you take a child at 3 or 4 years old and give them intense instruction in any one specific academic field, that they would be able to master it before the age of 10. Okay, so I'll just give you like a quick rundown of the accomplishments of all 3 sisters. So the first sister, Susan, would have been the first woman to have been declared a grandmaster in history because she completed the norms. So when you compete as a chess professional, you have to do what are called norms. So you would have to, like, for example, you have to beat a grandmaster, or you have to have won 3 games above a certain rating, or things like that. Unfortunately, Susan was never declared an official grandmaster because at the time it was a very sexist industry. So she wasn't granted norms for competing in certain competitions, although by today's standards, in retrospect, she should have been awarded the grandmaster because she completed all of her norms in excess of 10 times. She was the women's world champion for many years. She's the world speed chess champion, the blitz champion. She is an educator. I believe she's now 52 years old. She lives in the chess capital of the world in St. Louis, Missouri. She runs a foundation and an institute. She helps children learn chess, and she's honestly an icon. Second sister, Sophia. Sophia's kind of my favorite because I'm the middle child and Sophia was also the middle child. They called her the lazy one. She still became a international master, which is a very high prestigious accolade that can be granted in chess. She was able to become an international master, and her huge claim to fame was called the Sack of Rome. So in 1989, at a very young age, Sophia went to Rome and competed in a tournament and broke a Guinness World Record for the highest score for a female in a tournament. And she presently holds the 5th or 6th highest score in a professional tournament in history. And she just smoked them. She got 8.5 out of 9, which is basically like almost a perfect score. If you don't understand chess scoring, it's it's kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but she slayed them. She destroyed them. She has competed in and won more international tournaments than almost any other grandmaster in history. However, she wasn't as into chess as her sisters, so she retired kind of quickly, moved to Israel, and became an artist. And you know what? Whatever, good luck for you. Good for you, Sophia. The last one was Yudit, who is widely and universally considered to be the strongest female chess player of all time. She is, at her peak rating, she was rated 8th in the world, which again, I mean, it's not number one, but 8th in the world is a very high score, and the margins that separate the top 10 are so fine that basically anyone in the top 10 could be the world champion at any point in time. So it is very impressive that she was able to achieve that level of success in chess. In 1989, Garry Kasparov, who was the world champion for a long time, he's still kicking. He's a very strong chess player. He has a masterclass on masterclass.com. One of the most respected chess players in all time. In 1989, he released a quote that said that women could not compete in chess at the same level as men because women just didn't have the mental fortitude. And he would say that women should just stick to things that women can do good at, and like if women wanted to play chess, they should play in their own categories. Yudit found this appalling, which is why she's never competed for the women's grandmaster or women's world championship like her sisters did. Her sisters also didn't like the separation between men and women, but Yudit was like, I'm not competing for the women's world champion because I want to be the world champion, and you are not going to separate me. So in 2002, she got to get her revenge on Kasparov when she kicked his ass at a tournament. So she has beaten the world champion. She's beaten multiple world champions throughout her career. She's probably beaten the top 10 players many times in competition, and she is a straight up badass. She's kind of like she's kind of like Beth Harmon from the Queen's Gambit, although the Queen's Gambit story was written before Yudit kind of came up, even though they look very similar and their stories are kind of similar. Not really. She was never addicted to anything, but she was a genius. Laszlo, their father, always refuted the idea that his children were prodigies. He would say that they were the product of the Polgar Experiment. Between all three sisters, they have over 15 medals in chess Olympiads. They have multiple world titles. They all have contributed greatly to the world of chess, and especially the empowerment of children coming up in chess, especially in developing nations like India, parts of China, where they're really looking for the next great talent and pushing young girls to get into chess. So in conclusion, for the Polgar Experiment, you have to think about the idea of nature versus nurture. So are geniuses really born, or can you create a genius? The other thing is are men smarter than women, or are men just given more opportunities to be smarter than women? Is it really equal? Are women better at good things than men are? Do women have a place in open chess? And I would say that most experts agree at this point in time that within the next 10 years, we probably will see a female world champion in chess. And yeah, so let me know what you think. What do you think about the Polgar Experiment? All right, if you like this video and you'd like to hear more, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.